Mad Wolf here. Arctic is at work. I am going to do something different today. I am going to drink some Pepsi, some cherry Pepsi. This is actually Arctic's last one. So, yeah, if anybody's like, who stole the last Pepsi? Yeah, I did it. Okay, so I stole the last Pepsi. This is Arctic's Pepsi. I'm going to buy some more tonight. I'm going to do something different. I am going to talk about Sega versus Nintendo. I'm going to relive the 90s console wars. Now, I know the first thing you guys are going to be saying is, well, Mad Wolf is actually a Sega guy, so he's biased. And you know what? Technically true. I am more of a Sega guy now, especially with the stuff Nintendo's doing, where copyright claims on stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm actually going to try to be as fair as I can and talk about these two systems. Now, I don't have an actual NES Super Nintendo right now. Arctic had actually gone out and got the Retrobit Duo, and you guys know we have the Sega Genesis plus Sega CD. No 32X. So, but I'm going to try to get into this. So, first thing I want to talk about is the hardware. Now, a lot of people say the Sega Genesis sound is, quote, tinny. It sounds mechanical, and I could understand that. I really can. However, the Super Nintendo, if you play a lot of action games, a lot of shooters and stuff, the explosions and everything sound muted, almost diluted and like watered down. And so for people to say, oh, well, the Sega Genesis, it sounds too, and the Super Nintendo sounds nicer, well, certain things should not sound nicer. For example, let's take Super Metroid. When she's launching missiles, those missiles should have more, they should sound more powerful. They should have more oomph. You play frickin' Herzog's Y when you explode. You play RoboCop versus Terminator with those explosions. The sound actually is better, in my opinion, better on the Sega Genesis. You play Afterburner, you got everything, and it looks freaking great. Road Rash, sound is great. The music is a little hard to get into. Now, first of all, I do like some of the Super Nintendo music. The synthesizers just kind of sound weird, though. Like, I don't know, just weird, softer. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Super Mario, it sounds more symphonic. That's cool. Sega Genesis has a more rockin' kind of music. Trying to think, like RoboCop versus Terminator, honestly made for both systems. If you compare the music to the Sega Genesis compared to Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis sounds better. Now, on that same note, you play Alien 3 on Sega Genesis compared to Super Nintendo. One actually sounds more disco-y, I guess, funky town, whereas the Super Nintendo one almost sounds like music from the Alien movies, which is freaking cool. So that one's kind of hard to say when it comes to music. Both have games that are but at the same time, let's talk about the hardware, or let's talk about the video. This one's going to be easy. Super Nintendo actually does have way better graphics. For that reason, I actually like a lot more arcade games on the Super Nintendo, such as Terminator 2, the arcade game. Mortal Kombat 2 actually looks better on the Super Nintendo, but at the same time, Mortal Kombat 2, there's some controversy. I'm not going to get into the controversy right now. So graphically, Super Nintendo can look better. Now, I'm talking about games that may not be the most popular, such as Alien 3. Oh my god, it looks way better on Super Nintendo than it does for the Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis 1 looks good, don't get me wrong. Super Nintendo 1 just frickin', that's one of my reasons to have a Super Nintendo is Alien 3. Super Metroid looks great on the Super Nintendo. I think one of the nice things about the Super Nintendo is that fake fog look. That's not the Mode 7. Mode 7 has something to do with the background, and it does look nice, but that fake fog look actually looks good. RoboCop versus Terminator does not look as good. It looks kind of cartoonish. Turn and Burn No Fly Zone. Really beautiful visuals, really beautiful graphics. Looks like an F-14 Tomcat. Honestly, once again, one of the games I really love for Super Nintendo. So, graphically wise, it's an improvement compared to Sega Genesis. Terminator 2, the arcade game, has nothing compared to the visuals of the Super Nintendo's Terminator 2, the arcade game. Now let's go and get into the meat of this, the gameplay. Honestly, Super Nintendo has a lot of text involved. Now with games like Zelda, Link to the Past, I almost called it Breath of the Wild, I'm an idiot. In Zelda, Link to the Past, understandable, you're on this role-playing adventure, action game, action-adventure game. I call Zelda an action-adventure game, even though you're playing the role of Link, kind of a role-playing game. I consider it an action-adventure. I also consider the same thing for Metroid. But for Zelda, I completely understand. For Mario, I kind of understand. At the same time, I'm like, it's kind of boring in Mario, which is already a more slow, patience-y game. He doesn't run fast. I'm sorry, Sonic runs fast. That's one of the advantages Sega Genesis has over the Super Nintendo. The majority of games are more, you want to play a game? Boom, you're playing a game. Afterburner. You don't have to you don't have to read all this text about your jet taking off, like Turn and Burn No Fly Zone. Alien 3 for Super Nintendo, as much as I love it, a lot of people are not going to like it because, one, it's objective oriented. To beat one level in Alien 3 for Super Nintendo, you have to go to a computer, choose a mission from the computer, read what you're supposed to do in this mission, find in this maze of shit where you're supposed to go, and get the job done. You have to solve multiple objectives like this just to beat one level in the Super Nintendo Alien 3. Whereas Sega Genesis 1 and original Nintendo, much more straightforward. You have a time limit, gotta find all the prisoners, then you gotta find the exit. It's arcadey. It's like an arcade game. It's got that challenge, but it's just much more straightforward. RoboCop versus Terminator. The gameplay starts. You do have this scrolling kind of Star Wars dialogue thing going on, but skip it. Just play the game, blow your enemies away. It's frickin' 90s violence at its best for Sega Genesis. Super Nintendo 1, it's cool how the storyline plays out. I won't give it discredit for that. But once again, for two of the greatest sci-fi characters, in my opinion, duking it out like that, it's like, wow, you guys made this boring. I just want to play RoboCop. I want to shoot some bad guys, come across Terminator, and have a fight. No, that doesn't happen. You get so much dialogue. You get Rogue, Ed 209. I don't know. For me, I admire what they were trying to do for RoboCop vs. Terminator for Super Nintendo, but I'm like, damn it. This failed so badly. So I do think gameplay-wise, there's way too much dialogue in Super Nintendo. Even games like Hunt for Red October. Once again, it's a fun game. I used to play it. My dad bought it, and I actually told him the gameplay was like 688 attack sub. I don't know why I said that. Maybe because I just wanted to see this game. But, yeah, it's like the beginning of every level. It starts up, this is what you have to do. And it gets you this descriptive mission statement. And I'm sorry, all this game is you take the sub from the left side of the level all the way to the right side without dying. You really don't need to have that much dialogue for that. And Sega Genesis games do have their share of dialogue games too, such as Phantasy Star, Road Rash, but it's not all the time like the Super Nintendo is. And anyway, I applaud Super Nintendo for what it's trying to do, get you more immersed in the video game world, but at the same time, it's like, maybe it was a little bit too much for the time. Everyone says the 90s were the birthplace of ADHD. Maybe they were right. But if I want to play a plumber or a hedgehog, it doesn't matter. I just want to play the game. I don't want to read, "Welcome to Yoshi's Island. My name is Yoshi," and skip that crap. There's a princess to be saved, okay? Now we're going to get into the mascots, the popular games versus one another. I do think this is a important thing to get into. A lot of people make fun of Sonic the Hedgehog. "Gotta get fast. I eat chili dogs." I like chili dogs. They're delicious, especially with extra onions. No, that's not what I'm going to get into. In the gameplay, Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, there are no chili dogs. People are going off about Sonic, and even that song, "Gotta Get Fast," that was from the frickin' Sonic X cartoon, which was 2000s, and that shouldn't really count. I'm talking 90s. So anyway, let's look at these mascots. You got Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, when he first exploded, he was the blue dude with an attitude. I don't remember where I came across that slogan as a kid, but holy crap, that was frickin' cool. I think it was on I think it was on my brother's t-shirt. Anyway, let's look into this character. Sonic is a hedgehog. He goes fast, and he's rescuing animals being turned into efficient machines that by the Dr. Eggman Robotnik, Dr. Ivo Robotnik. There's some lost in translation thing going on there. But anyway, Dr. Eggman Robotnik, and Robotnik just wants to turn the world into one giant robo city, and pollution, it's killing the wildlife. There is a subtle pro-green message involved here. Now, when the game starts up, you don't really realize this. You're just playing this blue hedgehog running across the screen and fighting this red mustached guy. I used to think he was a clown when I was like 3 years old, and he had this flying machine. It was freaking cool when I was a kid. I'm like, holy crap, he's got a flying spaceship thing. But the message involved there is so subtle, and yet it's so 90s, and it's not in your face. Like, say, "We're the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We're mutants because we found ooze that some asshole just dropped in the middle of the street." And it's not like as flamboyant as Captain Planet with that really bad intro. "Oh, gotta save the planet." No, it's just Sonic the Hedgehog, the blue dude with an attitude that's going to wreck Dr. Robotnik's weekend and fly into space and blow up the Death Egg Zone. It's pretty awesome. Now let's look at Mario. Mario is an Italian plumber, jumps down pipes, eats mushrooms, squashes turtles and Goombas, whatever the hell a Goomba is, and is saving this princess from essentially a Godzilla monster. Maybe it's Anguirus' cousin. Maybe King Koopa is actually Anguirus' cousin or something. But what? I'm trying to think about that. I'm like, what is the point here? There's 2 points that I could really think in Super Mario. Now, one of them is actually really cool. No matter your origins, no matter what you are, you can do the right thing. You can be the hero. That is actually a kind of cool message to have for little kids. Praise to Nintendo for that, if that is the message. The only other message I could think of for frickin' Mario: mushrooms make you see the weirdest things. Do not eat mushrooms. Drugs are bad, okay? So those are my those are like the 2 main mascots for Nintendo and Sega. Now let's look at, comparing wise, racing games. Well, Super Nintendo had Super Mario Kart, which really isn't that bad. It's fun. It's cartoonish. My main issue with it, though, is the world is very flat. Even the barriers, which your little carts can do this bunny hopping thing, but they can't go over these really flat barriers. I mean, it's a really flat world, and does not feel three-dimensional at all. When I think of racing games for the Sega Genesis, actually I think of Road Rash. And what could be better than riding a motorcycle over hills? It's weird. The races are very linear. However, they feel so three-dimensional and so much like you're in the real world, because you're going over hills. Your motorcycle actually will ramp over hills. You can fall down. You're being chased by cops. You got cars you got to avoid. And you got angry bikers trying to punch you or throw chains at you. And can ultimately even kick your motorcycle off the road so you hit a tree. That is a pretty immersive racing game for the Sega Genesis. For a system as simple as the Sega Genesis. Holy crap. So, you know, comparing Super Mario Kart to Road Rash, it's a no-brainer. Road Rash wins. F-Zero is an interesting one because it's flat like Super Mario Kart, but it's also a little bit edgier. But at the same time, it still feels very flat to me. I like F-Zero, though. I still think Road Rash wins. Now let's talk about Jet Games. Who can forget Afterburner? Seriously, this game was in 2 90s movies that I know of. One is Terminator 2 Judgment Day, where the T-1000 is hunting down John Connor, and John Connor is in the frickin' cockpit arcade playing Afterburner. The other one is Suburban Commando, where Hulk Hogan thinks he's hearing laser guns in an arcade, so he goes in, and this kid is losing at Afterburner, and he winds up actually beating the game, and everybody's like, you beat it, you saved, or you beat the game, and he's like, game? What game? It's a really stupid movie, to be honest, but it's just so fun, and I think that kind of captures the point of Afterburner, is it's just so intense, and such this great arcade game, it just sucks you in. And, you know, you're just like, ah, you see all these explosions. Your jet explodes. It is in your face. It has attitude. Once again, total Sega 90s-ness. Jet Games for Super Nintendo. There's only 2 that really come to mind. One is Turn and Burn No Fly Zone, which I don't know if you guys have seen my videos, but I've talked about it. I actually really like Turn and Burn No Fly Zone. It's a dogfight simulator for the Super Nintendo. Unfortunately, that's all it is dogfighting. You're flying around this grid, you're hunting other jets down, and you shoot them. It's not as intense as Afterburner. It's also not as memorable. The graphics are great. The Game Boy version is terrible. I'm going to tell you that one right there. But, you know, that's all it is. It's just a dogfight simulator. It's never, oh, I have to get to the very end. There really is no sense of urgency in the game. Another one that I can think of is Super Strike Eagle, which is a Super Nintendo port of the F-15 series. And I used to play F-15 and Gunship 2000 on the computer. And when I saw the Super Nintendo version, it's cool. And it still has that, you gotta go here, you gotta bomb all this, you gotta make it back to base. And there is kind of a sense of urgency. You gotta make all your targets just blow up and go away. You have the dogfights, but once again, as far as it being as intense as Afterburner, as fast as it, no, it doesn't even come close. The only thing that really can come close, in my opinion, of Afterburner are those top-down spaceship game or top-down shmup games or side-scrolling shmup games, and I like those, but I don't know. I think Afterburner really took the shmup concept, the shoot 'em up concept, and tried to make it 3D and really immersive. No different than Space Harrier, no different than Super Thunderblade. I also have that for the Sega Genesis. And I don't know, I just can't really think of anything in comparison for the Super Nintendo. And that's kind of sad to say. Those are like my 3 main things that I really am comparing gameplay-wise to Super Nintendo. Now, let's talk about the clone ports. Now, it's not like now, where Wolfenstein The New Order pretty much is the exact same game for Xbox One that it is for PS4. I've already talked about Alien 3 and RoboCop vs. Terminator, 2 distinctly different games. Personally, I like the Sega Genesis RoboCop vs. Terminator. It's edgier, it's more aggressive, it's more violent, it feels more like RoboCop and Terminator in my opinion. Whereas the Super Nintendo one felt like a watered down comic book. Even comic books get violent, especially 90s ones by Dark Horse. Holy crap. And don't even get me started on Death and Return of Superman. That one is pretty violent for the 90s. But besides the point. The other game that I'm going to talk about, Alien 3. Super Nintendo blows away the Sega Genesis version. If you don't like the arcade games. Alien 3 on Super Nintendo feels more like a movie experience because it starts up with the face hugger attacking Ripley. It gets into her crash landing on the planet. It gets into, you having to save the prisoners and doing all these things. It feels like the problem-solving events of the Alien movies. Namely Aliens, not really Alien 3. It's kind of hard to turn Alien 3 into a Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis game, but, without having to add guns and stuff. What are they going to do? Make it like Friday the 13th where you're throwing rocks at aliens? Thank you for saving me. Oh no, there's Alien. Now I gotta turn into Mike Tyson Puncher. Which I actually don't mind the Friday the 13th game. I do want to get that for for the NES. Oh, yeah, that's a good one to get into. Speaking of horror games, is Doom. And Doom wasn't made for the Sega Genesis. It was actually made for the Sega 32X. And you would imagine twice the power. It's going to be better than the Super Nintendo version. No! Actually, I prefer the Super Nintendo version of Doom. The music is a lot better on the Super Nintendo version, surprisingly. Also, the Sega Genesis version, it's got better graphics, but it does not have all the levels. I think there's only 18 of the 27 levels. And I know the BFG, not even in the Sega 32X. And that's one of the biggest things about it, is getting that damn BFG. So yeah, some of the boss levels are missing. What really makes the Super Nintendo one good though, and I didn't know this when I first got it for the Super Nintendo, if you play it on easy, you only get to play the first episode. To play episode 2, you gotta play it on normal. To play episode 3, which takes place in hell, by the way, you have to play it on hard, which makes sense because hell, you are going to hell in that game, so there shouldn't be like 5 demons running around. That makes no damn sense. That said, Sega Genesis has a similar game called Zero Tolerance. This isn't Sega 32X, this is Sega Genesis, and Zero Tolerance really, I think, pushed the Genesis to its limits. It plays less like Doom and more like an advanced Wolfenstein 3D. For starters, you get character selection. Each character has his or her perks. One of them is a good marksman, one of them is a good medic, and the whole concept is you're going around this level and making sure all the aliens are dead. So you're navigating these mazes once again, more like Wolfenstein. And the thing that's really upgraded from Wolfenstein is actually you have an inventory limit. So you can pick up different guns, but you can only pick up a certain amount of them. Also, there's a radar. The radar is actually pretty helpful so long as you have the bioscanner, which does take up an inventory slot. You can get body armor. You can the controls are weird. To jump, I think it's A up. It's either A up or C up. To crouch, you gotta hit C down, I think. But depending on how you hit the D-pad with the shoot button, if you're unarmed, you can do uppercuts, you could do roundhouse kicks. It's pretty innovative for the Sega Genesis 3-button control pad. And in that sense, I'd say Sega Genesis Zero Tolerance is way better than Super Nintendo Doom. Way better than Sega 32X Doom. Now that said, once again, everyone's like, oh, well, he likes Sega Genesis better. Honestly, not 100%. There's some good Super Nintendo exclusives. such as Super Double Dragon. I do like that one. I do like Super Metroid. I do like Alien 3. I do like Terminator 2. You guys know these. And my main thing is just there's more Sega Genesis games that really catch my attention. Mortal Kombat on Sega CD blows away Super Nintendo Mortal Kombat. Eternal Champions is just incredible in my opinion. It's hard as balls, but it is a good fighting game. The graphics are great. I really love the characters. I really love the graphics of Eternal Champions. I just really suck at playing it. I really love the Sonic series. I do not, well, with the exception of Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles. Sonic 2 is my favorite. Afterburner, Road Rash. You know, there's a lot more for Sega Genesis than I feel there is for Super Nintendo. Herzog Zwei, RoboCop vs. Terminator, Vector Man, Adventures of Batman and Robin. Once again, also for Super Nintendo, but very different, and I don't like the way the Super Nintendo one did it. Batman Returns, once again, totally different for Super Nintendo. Batman Forever for Super Nintendo, however, is exactly the same as the Sega Genesis version. In some ways, graphically, it's better. One of the biggest problems, however, is it loads in between every stage of every level. You walk out a door, it gives you a loading screen. Holy crap. And you thought they didn't invent this until Sega CD. Super Nintendo does it too, and it's bad on Batman Forever. So, that's how I look at it. Now that I say that, you know, oh, he likes Super Nintendo games. He likes Sega Genesis games. Now there's the ultimate question. Who really won the console wars of the 90s? Everyone's probably thinking, hell, he's going to say Sega Genesis. No. Sega Genesis, I actually really praise for their hardware, and it lasted a long time. Lost World on Sega Genesis, one of my favorite Sega Genesis games. One of my favorite dinosaur games. Came out, I think, 98, so 9 years running of the Sega Genesis, and I think that was one of the last Sega Genesis games. But PlayStation totally dominated the market. It kicked Nintendo's ass, it kicked Sega's ass, and holy crap, I think the system was invented in 93 in Japan, 94 here in America. My brother actually got one in about 98. But the PlayStation lasted well into the 2000s on that just one system. The Sega Genesis had the 32X. It had the Sega CD expansion. And it also was succeeded by the Saturn. It was succeeded by the Dreamcast. There was even the Game Gear. Sega had a lot going on, and PlayStation blew Sega Genesis away. Same thing for Nintendo. Nintendo had the Game Boy, the Super Nintendo, the Virtual Boy. That's something I'm pretty sure Nintendo doesn't want on their record, the Virtual Boy, but it's on the record. Then you had the Nintendo 64, which by itself, you know, it's a good console. It did not nearly put up a fight to the PlayStation. The sad thing about the PlayStation, from what I understand, it was originally going to be the Nintendo add-on for the Super Nintendo to basically rival the Sega CD. Nintendo wanted Sony to make this for the Super Nintendo. And then something happened. Nintendo gave the rights to Philips. And we've known how the Philips CDI Nintendo games went. And, yeah, good job, Nintendo. Once again, I'm pretty sure it's something else they don't really want on their record. And, hey, we all make mistakes. You wanted to pass Sony up for Philips, that's on them. But, yeah, so when it comes to the 90s console wars, Sega and Nintendo definitely didn't win. It was PlayStation all the way. A competitor that is now rivaling Xbox. And honestly, Sony, I really hope wins the console wars, basically, of the 2010s. Just because they, like Sega, they're putting out more interesting games. They're really trying to make more interesting games. They're publishing more interesting games. you do have your games that are made for both systems. But anyway, that's besides the point. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Sega versus Nintendo. Both the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, great consoles. They do have their perks. They do have their downsides. If you were to collect for one, I would have to say go for Sega Genesis, just because a lot of the games are actually cheaper. A lot of the games I like for Super Nintendo, you're going to be paying a pretty penny for, and it'd be a better and cheaper route to collect those games more on the Virtual Console for the Wii's. The Wii's, or I don't know how the Nintendo Switch is doing it. I'm not even touching a Nintendo Switch. So, anyway, guys, those are my thoughts. Hope you liked it, and I hope I brought some nostalgia to the 90s for you. Have a good one.